Welcome to African Mafia Stories, where loyalty is currency, power has a price, and every city hides a secret. Today's story is based in Sierra Leone. Enjoy!
There was a saying in Freetown: if Rama Ba smiled during a negotiation, somebody else was about to lose a fortune. I never corrected people. Fear was cheaper than advertising. The city woke before sunrise. Motorbikes buzzed through the narrow streets. Vendors argued over fish prices. School children in bright uniforms dodged traffic with the confidence of people who believed adults would eventually stop for them. Adults rarely did. From my office on the 8th floor, the Atlantic stretched across the horizon like polished steel. Fishing boats drifted near the shoreline while cargo ships waited farther out, patient as vultures. People assumed my mornings were glamorous. They weren't. They were spreadsheets, investment forecasts, acquisition reports, coffee, more coffee. Power was rarely won with bullets. It was usually won with paperwork. You're smiling. I looked up. My assistant, Rama, stood in the doorway carrying a folder thick enough to stop a small-caliber bullet. I wasn't. You were. I was calculating. That's somehow more frightening. I accepted the folder. The Callan estate. She nodded. They've accepted your final offer. I opened the file. Dozens of photographs. Old stone walls. Massive mango trees. An abandoned colonial mansion overlooking the Atlantic. Most people saw an expensive ruin. I saw possibility. The estate had survived empires, governments, coups, civil wars. Yet for decades, nobody had managed to buy it. Until now. Any objections? I asked. Rama hesitated. The family priest. I blinked. The priest. He says the house should never belong to one person. I closed the folder. Then he shouldn't have encouraged the family to sell it. She laughed. I'll arrange the signing tomorrow. No. She frowned. Today. The lawyers aren't ready. They'll learn. That was another thing people misunderstood. Speed wasn't impatience. It was strategy. If you gave people time, they found courage. By lunchtime, half the city's business community had gathered at the annual Children's Education Charity Gala. Everyone attended. Politicians, bankers, foreign investors, television personalities, even the people pretending they hated each other. Especially them. Money loved photographs. The ballroom glittered beneath crystal chandeliers. Women wore flowing gowns stitched by local designers. Men wore tailored suits that cost more than some family homes. Everyone smiled. Nobody relaxed. I walked through the room with Rama beside me. Conversations paused. Eyes followed. Some admired me. Others measured me. A few hoped I would fail. Those were my favorite people. Hope made opponents predictable. The Minister of Lands intercepted me before I reached my table. Madam B.A. Minister, you've been busy. I dislike boredom. He chuckled. So I've heard. He lowered his voice. I'd reconsider today's purchase. I studied him. You came all the way across the ballroom to give me free advice. It's not free. There it is. His smile faded. Walk away from the estate. And if I don't, you'll discover some properties cost more than money. I tilted my head. I've never enjoyed threats disguised as conversation. It wasn't a threat. What was it? A warning. He walked away before I could answer. Rama appeared beside me. You look annoyed. I hate unfinished conversations. Should I investigate him? No. She looked surprised. I think he's frightened. The auction room occupied the hotel's west wing. Only 12 bidders had been invited. Private sale. No cameras. No publicity. Exactly how serious people preferred their business. The auctioneer adjusted his glasses. Ladies and gentlemen, the bidding began. Within minutes, 3 investors withdrew. Then another. The numbers climbed. Someone across the room kept raising the offer without hesitation. I couldn't see his face. Only his hand. Interesting. Very few people enjoyed losing money. This one seemed determined to lose spectacularly. 24 million. Silence. The anonymous bidder lifted his paddle again. The auctioneer smiled nervously. 25. I didn't even look up. 30. The room inhaled. Rama leaned closer. You're overpaying. I know. Then why? Because he isn't buying a house. She looked confused. He's buying time. Across the room, the paddle lowered. No further bids. The gavel struck. Sold. Applause echoed politely. I had just become the owner of the oldest private estate in Freetown. The anonymous bidder stood. Still no face. He walked out. Interesting. People who lost gracefully were either dangerous or planning something worse. The explosion shattered every window in the ballroom. Glass rained from the ceiling. Screams swallowed the music. The floor trembled beneath my feet. Instinct took over. I grabbed Mariama. Down! The second blast came from outside. Smoke rolled across the entrance hall. People stampeded toward every exit simultaneously, which, mathematically, was the worst possible decision. Someone fired a gun. Then another. Not random. Controlled. Professional. A security guard collapsed near the doorway. Another dragged guests behind marble pillars. The charity gala had become a battlefield in less than 15 seconds. Mariama gripped my arm. Who is this? I don't know. A lie. I had 3 guesses already. None of them were comforting. Across the ballroom, a man in a black suit wasn't running. He was walking. Calmly. Watching. Not the panic. Meh. For a heartbeat our eyes met. Dark. Steady. Measuring. He wasn't one of the attackers. He wasn't protecting anyone either. He looked like a man solving a difficult equation. Then someone rushed him from behind. Without looking, he stepped aside. The attacker hit the marble floor. The stranger kept walking. Too smooth. Military. My heartbeat slowed instead of racing. Because I suddenly understood something. The gunmen were amateurs. The man watching me wasn't. And somehow, I knew he hadn't come to save my life.
Most people imagined men like me carried 2 things. A gun and a guilty conscience. They were half right. The gun was real. The guilt had expired years ago. It doesn't disappear, it simply gets tired of following you around. By the time the charity gala erupted into chaos, I already knew where every exit was, which security guards had military experience, and which ones had learned everything they knew from action movies. The difference mattered. Real professionals watched people. Pretenders watched doors. I hadn't come to kill Rama Ba. Not yet. I had come to decide whether she deserved killing. People who hired me hated that part. I insisted on seeing the target first. Some contracts ended after 5 minutes. Others never began. Truth had an irritating habit of ruining expensive plans. The explosion wasn't part of the agreement. Neither was automatic gunfire. Whoever organized this wanted headlines. I preferred silence, which meant fewer funerals. I stepped into the smoke-filled corridor as terrified guests poured past me. One of the attackers rounded the corner carrying an assault rifle. Too much weapon. Too little training. His finger rested permanently on the trigger. That usually ended badly for everyone. He saw me. Move. Instead I walked toward him. People mistake confidence for bravery. It isn't. It's mathematics. Panicked men make predictable mistakes. His rifle came up too quickly. I trapped the barrel with my left hand, drove my shoulder into his chest and twisted. The weapon clattered across the marble floor. His eyes widened. You. He never finished. A short punch beneath the ear folded him onto the tiles. Still breathing. Exactly as planned. Behind me another gunman shouted. I picked up the fallen rifle. Removed the magazine. Threw the rifle into a decorative fountain. Now it was just expensive scrap metal. Idiot, the second attacker yelled. Probably. But it irritated professionals when criminals littered. Outside police sirens echoed through the streets. Too late. Sirens were apologies with flashing lights. I slipped into the hotel's underground parking garage. Cool air. Concrete pillars. Oil stains. No screaming. My phone vibrated. One message. Status? I typed 3 words. Unexpected complications. The reply arrived almost immediately. Finish the contract tonight. No greeting. Just instructions. People who hid behind encrypted messages usually believed secrecy made them powerful. It mostly made them boring. I deleted the conversation. An elderly attendant emerged from a security office holding a mop. He stared at me. You look like you've had a difficult afternoon. So do you. He glanced toward the ceiling where muffled sirens echoed. They are saying terrorists. They are wrong. Political. No. He frowned. What then? Someone wanted one woman frightened. His eyebrows climbed. That much trouble for one person. They weren't trying to frighten her. Realization spread across his face. They wanted her dead. I nodded. The old man sighed. People used to settle arguments by refusing invitations. I miss those days. So do I. By sunset, Freetown had become a city of rumors. Some blamed foreign investors. Others blamed politicians. A radio presenter confidently accused 3 different groups within 20 minutes. Confidence and evidence had never been close friends. I parked outside my apartment overlooking the Western Hills. Modest building. Expensive homes attracted expensive problems. Inside, everything sat exactly where I'd left it. 1 table. 1 bookshelf. 1 coffee mug. 1 pistol locked inside a safe. Weapons should never become decorations. I showered, made coffee. Then opened the file on Rama Ba. Photographs. Financial records. Travel history. Business acquisitions. Court cases. Tax compliance. Interviews. Awards. Charitable donations. Interesting. Very interesting. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Either she was the cleanest billionaire in West Africa, or someone had spent years removing every fingerprint she'd ever left behind. Both possibilities worried me. At exactly 8 o'clock, my doorbell rang. Nobody rang my bell. People who knew me called first. People who didn't usually regretted it. I opened the door halfway. A woman stood outside. Late 60s. Neatly wrapped headscarf. Carrying a covered dish. I made too much cassava leaf. I smiled despite myself. No, you didn't. No. You made exactly enough. She nodded. As always. My neighbor, Auntie Fatu, pushed the dish into my hands. You've lost weight. I haven't. You have. I exercise. You forget to eat. I forget many things. She narrowed her eyes. When are you getting married? There it is. There what is? The real reason you came. She laughed. You need somebody to stop you becoming furniture. I wasn't aware chairs were so dangerous. Loneliness is. I looked at the food. You spoil me. I prevent you from starving. Same thing. As she walked away, she turned back. There was a woman asking about you today. That stopped me. What woman? Beautiful. That narrows it down to half the city. She ignored me. Didn't give a name. What did she want? She shrugged. She asked whether you still lived here. And? I said no. I blinked. You lied. I've lived long enough to know when strangers ask polite questions. I smiled. I owe you. You owe me grandchildren. She disappeared into her apartment before I could argue. At 9:15 someone tried my front door. Not knocked. Tried. Quietly. Professionally. I switched off the lights. Silence settled over the apartment. The handle moved again. Once. Twice. Then stopped. A faint scrape came from the lock. Whoever was outside had tools. Good ones. I crossed the room without making a sound and looked through the narrow gap beside the curtain. 3 figures. Not one. 1 working the lock. 2 watching the stairwell. They weren't burglars. Burglars don't arrive in teams. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. 1 message. If you value your life, leave now. They know where you live. No signature. No explanation. I looked back through the curtain. The man at the lock had just frozen. His hand drifted to his ear. Someone was speaking to him through an earpiece. A second later, all 3 men backed away. No panic. No confusion. Just a clean, disciplined withdrawal. Within moments, they were gone. I stayed where I was for another full minute. Then I looked at the message again. Someone had just saved my life. The problem was, I couldn't think of a single person who had a reason to.
People think surviving an assassination attempt changes you. It doesn't. It changes everyone else. The morning after the gala, my phone contained 217 missed calls. Half were reporters. Half were people suddenly remembering they had always admired me. Fear creates remarkable friendships. I ignored every message. Mariama placed fresh coffee on my desk. You've become famous. I was already famous. The difference is yesterday people wanted your autograph. And today, they want your obituary. I couldn't argue with that. The police commissioner arrived just after 9. He brought 3 detectives, 2 notebooks, and absolutely no useful answers. We believe the attackers escaped toward the eastern districts. I don't. He frowned. We recovered shell casings. I don't care. His pen stopped moving. What do you care about? The man who paid them. Silence. 1 detective cleared his throat. That investigation takes time. So does growing old. The commissioner folded his notebook shut. You think we don't understand how these people operate? I think if you did, they wouldn't still be operating. Mariama coughed into her hand to hide a laugh. The commissioner's smile looked painful. You've made enemies, Madame Ba. I've made competitors. There's a difference. Competitors want to beat me. I leaned forward. Enemies want to erase me. By midday, my lawyers were celebrating the successful purchase of the Callan estate. I wasn't. The minister's warning kept echoing in my head. Some properties cost more than money. That sentence bothered me because it wasn't poetic. It was specific. Someone wanted that estate badly enough to kill for it. Which meant there was something inside it that wasn't listed on the survey. The front gates groaned open just after lunch. The estate sat high above the city, wrapped in towering silk cotton trees whose roots looked like they had been wrestling the earth for centuries. The mansion itself had surrendered to time. Cracked stone. Broken shutters. Vines climbing through shattered windows. Beautiful. Most fortunes begin in ugly places. Mariama looked around nervously. I don't like it. You don't like old buildings. I don't like buildings that look back. I smiled. Buildings don't look. This one does. The caretaker was older than the house seemed possible to be. His name was Emmanuel. Nobody knew his surname. He carried an enormous ring of keys that jingled with every step. My father worked here, he said. His father before him. You stayed through all the wars. He nodded. The house stayed. His answer was interesting. Not I stayed. The house stayed. As though the building had made the decision. He unlocked the enormous front doors. Dust drifted through shafts of sunlight. Portraits lined the walls. Long-dead faces watched us enter. Emmanuel spoke quietly. Many people wanted to buy this place. I know. None of them came back twice. Mariama stopped walking. I'm going back to the car. I laughed. You're serious? Entirely. We spent 2 hours walking through forgotten rooms. Libraries. Ballrooms. Bedrooms untouched for decades. Then we reached the west wing. A heavy wooden door blocked the corridor. No handle. Only iron hinges black with age. Emmanuel stopped. I don't have the key. You own the keys. I own many keys. He looked at the door. Not this one. I studied the wood. Fresh scratches. Not old. Recent. Someone had tried forcing it open. Within the last few weeks. Interesting. Very interesting. Outside, gravel crunched beneath tires. 3 black SUVs rolled through the front gate. Too expensive for tourists. Too coordinated for coincidence. Mariama appeared in the doorway. They are armed. Of course they were. Nobody arrived in matching vehicles carrying flowers. 6 men climbed out. Perfect suits. Perfect posture. Perfect smiles. The leader adjusted his cufflinks before speaking. Madame Ba. I don't believe we've met. We represent interested parties. I already own the estate. We're prepared to double your investment. No. He smiled wider. Triple. No. His smile disappeared. Name your price. It's not for sale. His voice hardened. You don't understand what you've purchased. Neither do you. For the first time. He looked uncertain. Only for a second. But I noticed. You'll regret this. I've regretted shoes. I folded my arms. Never property. He climbed back into the SUV without another word. The convoy disappeared through the gates. Mariama stared after them. Should we call the police? No. Why not? Because whoever sent them already knows what the police would do. By evening, I had stopped pretending this was a business dispute. Someone was moving too quickly. Too confidently. As though every institution in the city already belonged to them. Back in my office, I opened the estate survey again. Page by page. Stone foundations. Boundary lines. Water access. Old maps. Nothing. Then something slipped from the back cover. A folded piece of yellowed paper. It wasn't listed in the inventory. Someone had hidden it there decades ago. I unfolded it carefully. Not a map. Not a deed. A single handwritten sentence. The truth sleeps beneath the chapel. No signature. No date. Just 6 words. A chill ran through me. The estate had a private chapel. I remembered passing it. Small. Overgrown. Almost invisible beneath the trees. Someone had wanted me to find this. The question was, who? At exactly the same moment, across the city, someone knocked on my office door. Mariama looked through the glass. I know him. So do I. The man from the hotel. The one who hadn't panicked. The one whose eyes never stopped calculating. Isaac Koroma. I told Mariama not to let him in. She didn't get the chance. The lights went out. The entire building fell into darkness. Emergency generators should have started within seconds. They didn't. Then came the first gunshot. Not outside. Inside the building. Someone had cut the power. And this time, they knew exactly where to find me.
People like to imagine courage is loud. It isn't. Courage sounds like breathing slowly while everyone else forgets how. The instant the lights died, I knew this wasn't another warning. It was an execution. Someone had disabled the generators before cutting the electricity. That required planning. Planning meant inside help. The receptionist screamed. Then another shot echoed through the lobby. Not aimed. A distraction. The killers wanted people running. Moving targets are easier to sort from stationary ones. I slipped through the revolving door just as two men burst from the stairwell. Neither wore masks. Professionals rarely did. Masks were for people worried about witnesses. These men expected there wouldn't be any. One reached inside his jacket. Too slow. I grabbed his wrist, drove him into a marble column, and his pistol skidded across the polished floor. The second man charged. He had enthusiasm I had experience. His momentum carried him past me. One sweep of my leg and he crashed into a reception desk hard enough to scatter computers onto the floor. Neither man got back up. Alive. Unconscious. The dead couldn't answer questions. The elevators were useless, so I took the stairs. 4th floor. 5th. 6th. Each landing smelled faintly of cordite. Fresh gunfire. Whoever was upstairs had already started working. Halfway to the 8th floor, I found a security guard sitting against the wall. Blood soaked his sleeve. Not fatal. Yet. He gasped. Used staff access. Inside help. Exactly as I suspected. How many? 4. That was enough. 4 disciplined shooters could empty an office floor in under 2 minutes. I kept climbing. The corridor was silent. Too silent. Office doors hung open. Desks overturned. Glass covered the carpet like frozen rain. Someone had been searching. Not looting. Searching. I heard voices. One calm. One frightened. Mariama. Tell us where she went. I don't know. A slap. Then another. I rounded the corner. 3 men. 1 questioning. 2 covering. Still no masks. Confident men. Overconfident. I picked up a fire extinguisher standing beside the wall. Heavy. Perfect. It sailed down the corridor. The lead gunman turned instinctively. The extinguisher exploded against the wall beside him with a deafening crash. All 3 looked toward the noise. Wrong direction. By the time they realized their mistake, I was already among them. The first man's wrist snapped backward. His pistol dropped. The second swung wildly. I ducked underneath and drove an elbow into his ribs. Air exploded from his lungs. The third managed 1 shot. The bullet shattered a glass partition. Then Mariama hit him with a computer monitor. I stared. She stared back. What? I got tired. Fair enough. The gunman collapsed. Mariama was breathing hard. You're Isaac. So I've been told. You took your time. I was parking. Despite everything. She laughed. Where's Rama? She pointed toward the executive offices. She locked herself inside. I hurried down the corridor. The office door was barricaded with filing cabinets. Smart. Temporary. I knocked twice. It's Isaac. Silence. I'm not here to kill you. A pause. Then Rama's voice floated through the door. That's exactly what someone here to kill me would say. I almost smiled. You've got a point. Another silence. Finally, the cabinets scraped across the floor. The door opened just enough for one eye. She looked exactly as she had at the gala. Composed. Except for the pistol in her hand. I don't trust you. I'd be disappointed if you did. She opened the door wider. What changed? I asked myself a question. And? Why hire me if they already had another team? Her expression shifted. They wanted insurance. Exactly. If you failed. They expected these men to succeed. She lowered the pistol. Which means you were never supposed to survive either. I nodded. Someone had tried to erase every loose end. Including me. 20 minutes later we were driving out of the city in one of my old Land Cruisers. No luxury. No tracking system. No tinted glass. Just an engine that refused to die. Rama looked out of the window. So, we're allies now. Temporarily. I've heard temporary arrangements become expensive. They usually do. She folded her arms. You still haven't told me who hired you. I don't know. She turned sharply. You accepted a contract without meeting the client. I accepted it through an intermediary. That's reckless. No, it's insulting. I agree. She frowned. You agree? I dislike anonymous employers. Yet you still accepted. I wanted to find them. She studied me for a long moment. You weren't hunting me. No, you were hunting whoever was hiding behind me. Now you're catching up. For the first time since we'd met. She smiled. Not the smile she'd used in boardrooms. Not the one newspapers photographed. A real one. It transformed her face. Dangerous. Not because it made her prettier. Because it made her easier to care about. That was a complication I hadn't budgeted for. The Callan estate sat in darkness when we arrived. No lights. No caretaker. No sound except the wind moving through ancient trees. Rama frowned. Emmanuel never leaves. I didn't like that sentence. We searched the grounds. The old man's lantern lay on its side outside the chapel. Still burning. His keys were scattered across the path. No Emmanuel. No signs of a struggle. Just gone. As if the night had swallowed him whole. Rama bent to pick up the lantern. Then she stopped. There. Carved into the chapel's weathered wooden door, so fresh the splinters still clung to the edges, were 4 chilling words. You came too late.
There are places that feel abandoned. Then there are places that feel like they are waiting. The chapel belonged to the second kind. Isaac rested a hand against the carved door. Fresh. Ours. He shook his head. Less. Someone had stood exactly where we were standing. Knife in hand. Calm enough to carve 4 words into hardwood. They hadn't been rushing. They'd wanted us to read them. I pushed the door open. It groaned like it objected. Dust drifted through the beam of Emmanuel's lantern. Rows of worn wooden pews faced a cracked stone altar. A cross hung crooked on the far wall. Everything looked untouched. Except the floor. Isaac crouched. See this? One flagstone sat slightly higher than the others. Not enough for most people to notice. Enough for him. He wedged his fingers into the narrow gap and lifted. The stone shifted with a grinding sound. Cold air rose from below. Hidden steps disappeared into darkness. So, I whispered. The truth really does sleep beneath the chapel. Isaac looked at me. After you. I bought the place. He sighed. I was afraid you'd say that. The staircase ended in a chamber no architect had ever admitted existed. Shelves lined every wall. Hundreds of leather-bound ledgers. Wooden chests. Rolled maps. Boxes sealed with faded wax. The air smelled of old paper and salt. Isaac slowly turned in a circle. This isn't treasure. No. It's memory. Every ledger carried names. Families. Businesses. Governments. Dates stretching back more than a century. Transactions. Land transfers. Private agreements. Some legal. Many impossible to explain. I opened one carefully. Inside was the signature of a man celebrated in every school history book. Beside it, a payment authorizing the forced removal of entire villages. History hadn't lied. It had simply left things out. Another ledger listed offshore accounts belonging to politicians who had publicly claimed they owned nothing. Another documented secret agreements between rival businessmen who had spent decades pretending to hate each other. Isaac looked over my shoulder. People would kill for this. They already have. The sound of an engine echoed above us. Then another. Isaac extinguished the lantern. Darkness swallowed the room. Don't move. Footsteps. Several. The chapel door opened. A man's voice drifted downward. Search everywhere. Another replied. The old caretaker never talked. He didn't have to. Silence. Then. Burn the house if you have to. Isaac's jaw tightened. They don't know about the chamber. Yet. Smoke drifted through the narrow gaps between the stones. They really were going to burn the estate. Not because it was valuable. Because history was. We waited. 1 minute. 2. Then came shouting. Not from inside. Outside. Someone was arguing. A woman's voice. Sharp. Confident. Mariama. I almost laughed. Only Mariama would arrive at an armed siege sounding annoyed rather than frightened. Another voice barked orders. Vehicles screeched. A whistle blew. Isaac frowned. That's not police. What is it? Military. He carefully lifted the stone just enough to see. Then he smiled. The people outside are fighting each other. What? Looks like your anonymous friends forgot to tell their partners everything. The battle above lasted less than 5 minutes. Automatic gunfire. Shattered windows. Running footsteps. Then, silence. Isaac climbed out first. The chapel was empty. Outside, the courtyard looked like a storm had passed through. Tire marks. Dropped rifles. Broken headlights. No bodies. Whoever had survived had taken everyone with them. Professional. Fast. Mariama sprinted toward us from the driveway. She threw her arms around me, then immediately stepped back. I'll hug you properly later. Why later? Because we're still being hunted. Fair point. Isaac was staring at something near the gate. A silver cufflink. Perfectly polished. He picked it up. Engraved on the back were 2 letters. A.M. I frowned. The minister. Isaac nodded slowly. He warned you to walk away. He knew. He knew exactly what was buried here. But why send me to buy it? Isaac slipped the cufflink into his pocket. Because someone needed the archive opened. And he looked directly at me. They never expected us to survive long enough to read it. An hour later we stood on the cliffs behind the estate. The Atlantic stretched endlessly beneath us. The first light of dawn touched the horizon. I held one of the oldest ledgers against my chest. So what now? Isaac didn't answer immediately. Finally he said, if we hand this to the wrong people, they'll bury it again. If we release everything, the country could tear itself apart. We stood in silence. The wind carried the scent of salt and rain. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking like an investor. I was thinking like a citizen. Then my phone vibrated. One message. No number. No greeting. Just 8 words. You found the archive. You missed the real prize. I looked up at Isaac. He had received the same message. Neither of us spoke. Because we both understood. The archive had never been the end of the hunt. It had only been the key that unlocked it.
I've learned that the most dangerous people rarely shout. They whisper. They let everyone else do the shouting for them. The message changed everything. You found the archive. You missed the real prize. Rama looked at me. Do you believe them? I believe people who think they've already won. She nodded once. They are trying to make us chase shadows. Maybe. But they also knew we'd find the archive. That meant only one thing. Someone had been watching us from the beginning. Not the estate. Not the city. Us. We drove back to Freetown just after sunrise. The city looked perfectly ordinary. Children walked to school. Street vendors arranged fruit beneath colorful umbrellas. Taxi drivers argued over passengers. Nobody would have guessed that somewhere among them, a man was quietly trying to reshape the country's future. The Minister of Lands was already on television. He stood behind a podium, looking calm. And I assure the public that those responsible for yesterday's violence will be brought to justice. Rama switched off the screen. He lies beautifully. His head practice. He'll destroy us. Only if we let him choose the battlefield. She turned toward me. You have an idea. I always worry when I do. The minister expected us to run. Instead, Rama requested a meeting. Officially. Publicly. At City Hall. He couldn't refuse without looking guilty. He accepted within the hour. Confident men often mistake invitations for victories. The council chamber overflowed with journalists, lawyers, business leaders, and government officials. Television cameras lined the walls. Everyone wanted to witness the confrontation between Sierra Leone's most powerful businesswoman and one of its most influential ministers. The minister smiled when we entered. I was relieved to hear you survived. You sound disappointed. A few reporters chuckled. His smile tightened. Rama walked to the front of the room, carrying a single leather ledger. Not the archive. One ledger. Enough. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, I recently purchased the Callan estate. The room fell silent. I now understand why certain people were willing to kill for it. The minister folded his hands. Madam Ba, I think grief has affected your judgment. Possibly. She opened the ledger, but handwriting rarely grieves. She read 3 names, 3 dates, 3 transactions, each connected senior officials to illegal land seizures decades earlier. Gasps rippled through the room. The minister's face remained still. Too still. Then he laughed. Anyone can forge an old book. I agree. Rama closed it. So perhaps you'd like to explain why your initials are engraved on this. She placed the silver cufflink on the table. His eyes flickered. only for a fraction of a second. It was enough. He ran. Not dramatically. Not shouting. He simply turned and headed for the side exit. Which told me everything. Innocent people argue. Guilty people calculate. I was already moving. He burst into the courtyard. A black SUV accelerated toward him. Waiting. Planned. He climbed inside. The vehicle sped away. I jumped into my Land Cruiser. Rama climbed into the passenger seat before I could tell her not to. You drive. I was going to. I know. The chase tore through the hills above Freetown. The minister's convoy knew the roads. I knew how people thought. At the next junction they chose the faster route. I chose the shorter one. We emerged onto the ridge just ahead of them. The lead SUV swerved. Too late. It clipped a stone barrier and spun sideways. The second vehicle braked hard. The minister stumbled out, clutching a pistol he clearly hoped never to use. He aimed it at Rama. You should have sold the estate. She stepped forward instead of back. You should have stopped lying. His finger tightened. Before he could fire, another voice echoed across the cliff. Drop it. Mariama. She stood behind him with 2 police officers she'd finally convinced to trust evidence instead of influence. For the first time since I'd met him, the minister looked afraid. He lowered the weapon. 3 months later, the trials had begun. Not everyone named in the archive was guilty. Not everyone guilty was named. History is untidy, but enough truth reached daylight to make burying it impossible. The Callan estate became a protected historical site. The hidden chamber was preserved under armed guard. Researchers would study it for years. School children would visit it. The truth, at last, belonged to everyone. Rama still worked too much. I still drank too much coffee. Some habits survive every adventure. One evening we stood on the terrace of the restored estate, watching the sun disappear into the Atlantic. You know, she said, when we met, you were supposed to kill me. I remember. You were terrible at it. I've had that complaint before. She laughed. A real laugh. The kind that doesn't ask permission. I've been thinking. That usually costs me money. She slipped her hand into mine. I don't need another bodyguard. Good. I need a partner. In business. She smiled. In everything. For once. I didn't have a clever answer. The ocean stretched toward the horizon, painted gold by the evening sun. Below us, Freetown carried on as it always had. Busy, noisy, beautiful. The city no longer whispered Rama Ba's name because people feared her. Now they whispered it because, when the truth finally had a champion, she had chosen to stand her ground instead of selling her silence. And that was how the woman everyone feared became the Queen of Freetown.
Thank you for listening. Tell me, which African country would you like the next Mafia story to be based in and why? Drop your answers in the comments and I will take it from there. If you enjoyed the story, like, share, subscribe. Because somewhere in Africa, another story is already unfolding.